Well, I think a lot of us have to wait and see exactly what the impact of Brexit is going to be on our institutions and the higher education sector. I think the curiosity is that I would guess the vast majority of people in higher education in this country and vast majority of universities would have chosen to remain because of the importance of student mobility, knowledge exchange, access to research funding, and just the give and take of intellectual ideas, which is the lifeblood of successful research universities across the world. Most universities and the people in them would have chosen to remain. But we obviously have to face now the reality of what the referendum has come out with. I think the best thing for us to do is to plan for hard Brexit. So there's a possibility of that. And then there's upside, obviously, if it transpires that it's softer and there are wins for the higher education sector. I think on the positive side, if you remember back to the 12 points of principle I think the government set out for Brexit, one of those was around protecting UK science, research and innovation. And I think that's a really important hook for the sector to work on. And I think it's good that government have noticed that. So I think we have to continue to work in partnership with the government to see what we can do to achieve the best possible arrangements post-Brexit for student mobility and Erasmus in particular, for access to research funding, although I think the best is likely to be associate member status from what we hear at the moment to things like Horizon 2020, and importantly securing the rights of our European Union colleagues who work at our universities to be able to stay here and to continue to work here.
Like nearly everybody who works in the higher education sector, I thought Brexit was a bad choice to make. We are, however, where we are, and we have to make the most of the situation that we are in. And indeed, you know, you can look and find a silver lining for the higher education sector. The government says, and you take it at its word, that it wants to be a world-facing, innovative economy that attracts the brightest and the best people and thrives in a global operating environment. And if that's the case, then universities are incredibly well positioned to help with that agenda, and indeed may be one of the few things in the armoury of the government in order to respond in that operating environment. And I think universities now have got real opportunities to help the UK get out of the difficulties it's almost inflicted on itself. Universities are globally facing. We are about attracting talent. We are about innovating, and we've got a role to play in driving the UK in the right direction towards economic success.
The likely impact of Brexit on the sector, I think, is very interesting. Some parts of the sector are still grieving after last June the 23rd, when they did not get the result they either wanted or expected, and actually the results by constituency in a sense show that very clearly. I think the sector has got to get over grieving and start to think of the opportunities and the way in which they can manoeuvre themselves to make the most of a situation which none of us can foresee, but where actually some planning will be essential. We recently at Shakespeare Martineau did a very interesting survey of mid-market firms, over 500 of them, of which 80 were in HE and FE, asking them for their attitudes to Brexit. Interestingly, that's the message from business. The message from business is, we may or may not have liked this, but we need to get on and start the planning. We've got to actually try to make the most of what the situation will be. And they're saying things like, you need a Brexit team, a team that's actually going to deal with your people. You know, some of the people in your firm are going to be very concerned about this. They may not be on one side or the other of the argument. Listen to them carefully, and also have a team that can integrate across the firm to ensure that as things emerge and change, that you're building that into your strategic planning. That means scenario planning as well, and taking real leadership in terms of, well, what would we do if X happened, or what would we do if Y happened? And I think some universities are beginning to do that, but some of them probably need to do more of it. One of the things I would forecast is that actually whatever the outcome of Brexit in terms of, you know, the ability for the sector to still access research markets and student markets in Europe, and we don't know about that properly yet, is that more universities will be thinking about transnational education and overseas partnerships in the future, even more so than they do now.
Oh, there'll be a period of change and panic, I suspect, as there's no real clarity as to where we're going with Brexit generally. The working out of trade agreements and so on, there doesn't seem to be any light on those issues yet and where we'll land within Europe. The impact for the sector and for Ulster University in particular is that the European HE sector remains important. The world HE sector remains important, and the relationships between institutions is ever more marked in how we collaborate together. For Ulster University in particular, we have to give some consideration as to how we participate within Europe. Obviously many universities across the UK now have European campuses and campuses further afield than that. Those will be issues we have to engage with that we really have never had to engage with before. But if you take an organisation like AHUA, there is a European equivalent. I don't know whether you're aware of what HUMAIN. I think it is the time for an organisation like HUMAIN at administrative level, for similar organisations at the academic level to be engaging more and more and leading that debate. But the pure practicalities, if there's a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic, it's something we haven't had. I remember in my lifetime that there was more a security border rather than a trade border. I think now it would have to be a trade border. It's inconvenient and it adds time to journeys and all of the rest of it. The concern for us would be, given the fee structure in the Republic of Ireland, that more Donegal based students in particular, but on other borders as well, look to institutions in the Republic rather than to the north for their higher education.
I'm much more concerned about the UK's place in the world than the specific consequences of Brexit itself. We're a global institution. We want to be able to recruit the best people from around the world. We want the best students from around the world to be able to come to the UK, and therefore we've got to be seen as being open for business, and that's what I think is the most important issue.
So how will Brexit affect universities? I think the single biggest impact is going to be on our people, both in terms of the recruitment of students in the EU, but also actually the recruitment and retention of our existing EU staff. A huge proportion of every institution's absolute elite in terms of research and teaching staff are drawn, as well as professional services, are drawn from the EU. And we're having to spend a lot of time just giving them the reassurance that we remain committed and want to support them as best we can. But obviously there's a limit to what we can actually say. I've been really cheered that I think we've offered nearly 60 roles to people from the EU since the Brexit result, and I think everyone has come as a result of those offers, and they've been moving into work with groups which are already strong. So clearly very talented people still want to work with very talented people. I think the main impact though is going to be the general approach to planning across higher education. What Brexit does is it puts a huge amount of uncertainty around our sort of core income streams and our core delivery of our strategic plans. The impact on kind of UK PLC will obviously filter down and translate to universities. So I'm already sensing that some governing bodies are getting nervous about making, too significant commitments in the medium and longer term, at least until we've got a little bit more understanding of what it's going to mean. I think on the positive side, it will probably mean that we assess our own risk appetite and our willingness to take risks on a project-by-project basis, which maybe the sector has not been so good at. I think it will also actually make us look more broadly around the world and really put a bit more effort and a bit more time into some of those global relationships, and actually also enhancing some of our existing EU relationships. They are strong, of course they are, but actually have we put enough time in and going out there and engaging directly? I'm not sure we have. So I think it's going to, it will potentially damage confidence. It will definitely mean that we have less money available to invest, because we're going to have to try and create, larger buffers of financial contingency to ensure that things, if they do go wrong, that we can manage them. But I think longer term, as long as we can stay engaged with what the government's going, as long as we're getting those core messages across, and as long as we're giving the reassurance, that we can do in a reasonable way to our staff and to potential students, then I think it will remain challenging, but I think we can make something positive out of it.